All right, listen up. If you're not running with Enzo in the First Descendant, you're seriously missing out. This guy, he's a one-man battalion, a total wrecking crew who doesn't need backup. He brings his own. He is the backup. Whether you want to tear through enemies or just tank everything that comes your way, including Colossi, Enzo is your go-to. In this video, I'm breaking down why this unstoppable Enzo build is a must-have if you're serious about crushing your enemies both solo and in group. Enzo brings it all, and that's good news because that means you really only need one build for him. Let's dive in.
Tux makes it exciting!
One build handles mobbing and bossing solo and in group. So although he needs a full catalyst upgrade to get the most out of him, in the end he's cheap because you only need one build. Let's jump right in. Really important, supply firearm enhancer. That's the main transcendent mod for Enzo. This is going to drop from encrypted vaults. So this summons a firearm enhancement device. Touching the device grants weak point damage and firearm critical hit rate up. This is both for you and for your team. Double-edged sword. That's replacing his #1, supplier firearm enhancer. So the cooldown on this is 10.6 seconds, not much in cost. The duration is 24.2. So for this build, that's what I've min-maxed. I've decreased all his cooldowns, but more importantly, I've driven up all of his duration and stripped away any skill damage. By doing this, I maximize what Enzo does best, and that's weapon damage. And the second thing he does best is buff himself and the team. And by cutting my cooldowns and increasing my duration, I'm doing that more often and longer. So if you don't use supplier firearm enhancer, this drops an ammo box that everybody can use once. It doesn't dish out a ton of ammo, I gotta say. Okay, the #2, not many people use it, the explosive drone. It's basically like an artillery shell. It's actually really handy for mobbing and for staggering, and that's what I use it for. So if I get surrounded by like 13 enemies, they're like clobbering me, then I just point it at the ground and I fire. It kills everybody within a radius. Also, if you're facing one of those big heavy shield guys, it'll stagger him where it reveals his weak points, and then you can just shoot him with your gun. We are using his enhanced combat suit. So this is special. Enzo is one of the only descendants that makes use of his shield. And that's one of the reasons why I've increased his duration so that I'm always healing. So summons shield recovery comms. When the shield recovery comms is first summoned, it recovers the shield and grants enhanced combat suit. So I got this cooldown at 15.8 seconds. That's great because its duration is 12.1. So this thing is always around. Your initial shield recovery is at 25%. So that's a big burst in heal. And then you're getting 6% thereafter for 12.1 seconds. And then you launch it again, get another spurt of 25, so on and so forth. And then the other thing we're playing into is perfect support. This thing's a beast, and there's a lot of details here, but in a nutshell, it gives you more power. It gives your team more power. It gives you utility. And this device is why Enzo is a weapons master. It allows him to have infinite ammo. All those weapons that have a hard time managing ammo, well, Enzo doesn't have that issue, which makes him very special. So it summons a small supply ship to himself and his allies. The small supply ship provides supply bullets and grants perfect support to allies and himself. The small supply ship attacks enemies in front, and when the skill ends, it fires a missile forward that causes a big explosion. So as far as the minor attack, the bullet attack from the drone, we have stripped its damage. So it's not doing any of that. I've increased its duration so that we're getting tons of ammo, but also tons of damage increase. Okay, so our cooldown is 47 seconds. The duration is 15 seconds. So that's 15 seconds of unlimited ammo, basically, and more damage. And that's plenty of time to bring down Colossis, even the strongest ones. There's also a range thing you can build into this, and that is helpful. There's no room on this build for that, but the greater your range, then the easier it is to buff your teammates who are a little further out. So supply bullets. So the supply cycle every 1.5 seconds. To field supplies at 7%. So here's the magic, perfect support. So firearm attack increase amount, 20%. Firearm critical hit rate increase, 20%. And there's a faster reload by 10%. And then he's got a passive. So grants fire support to allies within an area around self. Fire support effect enhances when same descendant is present, so when there's another Enzo within the party or squad. Efficiency increases when Enzo disarms the security of the encrypted vault, which means more rewards. So that's what makes Enzo somewhat required. You don't have to have Enzo, but he makes those encrypted vaults so much easier, and you also get more out of them. When it came to descendant priority, he's way up there. Bunny, Sharon, Enzo, required. Everybody else, optional. That's the way I see it. So we're establishing his damage around supply, firearm enhancer. So we got HP at 122 with skill duration at 8.8%. So that's battle stamina. Weighing the scales gives us more shield. Remember, he plays into shield and skill cost. And then I got nimble fingers to bring down cooldowns, increased HP for that. Shot focus because he is a gunner and we are not using any skill damage. Time distribution. This is more skill cooldowns and HP. Skill extension, more duration. Maximize duration, more duration at 40% at the cost of skill power, which is perfect. Increased defense, of course, increased shield. So the good news when it comes to his reactor, you don't really care what reactor he's running. You care about his stats. So skill duration up, skill cooldown down. When it comes to external components, they're on theme. I'm running 2 pieces of bravery and 2 pieces of annihilation. So bravery gives us max shield, fire resistance, and max HP. And then the set effect is giving us HP recovery and more shield at 12%. That's a ton. Here's the second piece, the processor. Double shields and shield recovery modifier. The annihilation set, I have defense, more shield recovery, and then max MP. And then skill duration at 5.7%. And for the memory, more HP and defense. So looking at his defensive stats, crazy numbers here, okay? So we got 27,000 in defense, 4,400 in shields. That is massive in shields. Remember, you get 25% of that back instantly when you deploy your healer drone. And then for HP, a whopping 11.5. As far as mana goes, he doesn't have a ton. He also doesn't need a ton. But during Colossi fights, look out for mana drops, especially if the fight is going to go long. In some of the more difficult bosses, I tend to need 1 or 2 of those. But they also tend to be around.
Let's do this!
For weapons, you can go with whatever you like, really, but I think he's a perfect matchup for the Enduring Legacy, and you'll see why in the stats. We're going to jump into lab here in a second. Okay, let's look at the details. On hitting an enemy, increases the status effect trigger rate corresponding to the element and inflicts the unique ability quenching on the target. And then on hitting a burned enemy, increases firearm attack and applies this buff to the attack. I got this halfway leveled up. I'm working on getting this all the way to the top because it's absolutely worth it, especially on this character's kit. And then quenching, max stacks at 40, fire resistance is brought down on the enemy, and your firearm attack is increased. Right now I have it at 9%. This edges up by 1% as you level up the weapon. And for a secondary weapon, I've chosen the Afterglow because on its own, it's powerful. You're getting some really nice crit chance here against Commanders and Colossus at 20%, and he's gonna give it 100% crit chance, which allows you to spec all into crit damage and weak point damage. And then for his third weapon, I'm using the Restored Relic. It basically has a guided missile, and that's what makes it special. It's based on a trigger rate. Right now, it's at about 70%. You're going to increase your fire rate. You're going to make this thing faster. Yeah, you're going to see this guided missile take off, and it'll directly hit an enemy and still apply splash damage. Otherwise, you're going to have the same AoE type shot that every launcher has in this game for the most part. So it's the best of both worlds. They give you this gun really early in the game, at least the first version. I recommend trying it. I don't think it makes a ton of sense on a lot of characters, but for Enzo, it does. And I think that really completes his kit. It's perfect for him. So the Vestigial Organ works really well with Glay, but he doesn't work well with that because that's only got 4 rounds. With Enzo, you want big mags because if you reload, you lose your buff and then you have to deploy your 1 and pick up your buff. And that's disruptive to his DPS. So the bigger the mag, the better. And so let's jump into the Enduring Legacy setup. So I have what you would expect for the core. So we got Rifling Reinforcement, which is firearm attack, action reaction, more firearm attack, fire rate here. And then for the most part, I'm going into crits. So I'm getting the base crit chance up with better insight and then better concentration, more crit damage. And then insight focus is going to give us both. I ended up going with concentration priority, and this is beautiful. This is beautiful. That's 120% crit damage. It's a beast. And wait till you see the stats on this thing. We get a negative 30% reload time modifier, but I got 2 points for you on that. 1, his kit decreases his reload time. And 2, you can break the reload animations by rolling or interacting with your skill partway through your reloading process. So that cuts it down also. Outside of that, I am building into a larger mag. So I got concentration support ammo, which gives us 30% more rounds per magazine and 6.5% crit damage. I have expand weapon charge, which is giving us 49% more rounds per magazine. So we are at a total of 205 rounds in that magazine, and that's perfect. He gets a buff until he has to reload, and then he has to re-earn that buff by deploying his #1 skill. So the longer you can go without reloading, the better. And that's why we want bigger mags with him. Plus, we've used just about every attribute we possibly can. But an alternative to one of these ammo things, if you wanted to, is put on fire attack. But I have fire attack on the weapon. But sharp precision shot is absolutely what I recommend on this weapon. So you get the negative 20% fire rate, not a big deal. First of all, this thing is hitting hard. It just obliterates weak points. You'll see what I do to these Colossi. But while pulling the trigger, you get plus 4% fire rate, and then you get negative 5% recoil, and then you get plus 6 firearm attack every half a second up to 10 stacks. So this thing just gets laser fast, but more important, not only gets stronger, but it gets very stable because of that recoil adjustment. So we're running action and reaction, and a lot of these Colossis have very small and moving weak points, like Pyromaniac, the one on his back, for example, or Dead Bride with the little jewel on her chest. This allows you to hone in on that and lay down some serious shots. And because it's so strong, you don't have to do it for very long. Okay, for the sniper, what you want to do is minimize your crit chance, because you're actually going to go over in crit chance, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I got rifling reinforcement for base damage, action and reaction for more base damage, electric enhancement here, better concentration for more crit damage, focus fire for weak point damage and crit damage, more weak point damage here, concentration priority for more crit damage, costing us some reload. I have this concentrate support ammo, but I haven't rolled anything into it, and I probably won't, because I don't use this that much on Enzo. It's just a backup weapon. And then I just went with weak point expansion, because again, you don't want to go strength and first shot, because you don't want to reload with him until you absolutely have to. So we got rifling reinforcement, more explosive attack, electric enhancement, fire rate, a bigger mag, and then descendant roll, which is a reload. And that's because I use this for intense mobbing. And even though the reload isn't that bad on it, what is it, like 2.5 seconds? The type of engagements I am using with this, I'm basically spamming the trigger. And because I have unlimited ammo, I don't want to break fire. I have a lot of work to do on this, but it's sort of on the back burner because I have a lot of projects open. So I don't want to invest any gold into this at the moment, but it's a beast. Okay, let's do some testing range work.
Let's do this!
So basically what I'm going to do here is show how his skills buff his dealio here. So if we look at the Enduring Legacy, these are the stats. The crit chance is at 33.5. The crit damage is 8x. Yeah, that's massive. And these stats are going to improve here in a second. And then weak point damage is at 1x. We're going to get a bump in that as well. Remember, he does get an improved reload time. So what I'm going to do here is put down my 1. I'm going to touch it, and that's going to give us our first buff, and then we'll look at the stats. All right, look at the crit chance. It jumped all the way to 82%, basically a 50% increase. Our crit damage is the same, and our weak point damage increased by basically 15%. It was at 1x, now it's 1.15. All right, here's our second buff, our number 4. Looking at the stats now, we're at 92% crit chance, still 8x crit damage, and then our weak point damage is the same. And we also are getting a base damage increase as well. Remember that. That increase in damage and crit rate is also going to go to your allies only when the drone is up. So when the drone expires, you're going to lose it. All right, for the Afterglow Sword, so we're at 50% crit chance at base, 3.7 crit damage. And now let's step on our number 1 here. Pick up that buff. This is going to be crazy. Watch this. All right, crit rate jumped to basically 80, and then we're at 3.7 crit damage still. Weak point is at 3.276. All right, let's pop our number 4. Now here's our second buff to the weapon. Looking at the stats again. Our crit chance is at 95%. Remember, there's a buff when hitting Colossi, and there's a buff when hitting Commanders. So that's over 100% right there when you're hitting those targets. 3.7 again on the crit damage, and weak point damage is also at 3.7. So yeah, he's a beast. He really is. Okay, so let's digress. So I think Enzo's perfect. There's not much I would change with him at all. He's tanky, he plays well solo and in team. So real talk, Enzo can be the one and only Descendant you rely on for all of the Colossi. So if you don't want to create boss builds for every Descendant, think about using Enzo as your primary for Colossi. He's very reliable, your team appreciates it, and he's self-sufficient. He can heal himself, you don't have ammo issues, which means you can bring the best guns in the game to the fight. He delivers damage with the best of them, and he can take punches like the best of them too. So very little downside with this guy. I think you're gonna enjoy this build. I'd recommend this build to anybody. Have fun. Thank you for hanging out with me. My name is Tuxedo Bandido. That's Tito Bandido.
One and only.
And this was another episode of The First Descendant. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss out on the fantastic experiences waiting for you in The First Descendant. And if you like videos like this, check out the one I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you want to see covered, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make everything possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be without you.
When you buy or download anything for The First Descendant, be sure to use Tux's creator code to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Follow me.